Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
It could be the political debate of the decade as Donald Trump is set to square off against Kamala Harris next Tuesday. Electricity prices in Alberta have dropped by more than 50% since last year. Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf will explain why. And the Lethbridge Polytechnic Kodiak soccer season gets underway this weekend. BCN's Landon Hickok will have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris will square off in a high-stakes debate for the first and perhaps only time next Tuesday. The presidential candidates will be fighting to sway voters on the biggest stage in U.S. politics. We have more now on this report from Kelly Daschle with the Associated Press.
It wasn't the debate either candidate expected months ago, but it's shaping up to be the most anticipated event to date in the 2024 contest. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris will square off on a Philadelphia stage next Tuesday for the first and perhaps only time before November's election.
I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight.
If you've got something to say,
the meeting comes just 2.5 months after President Joe Biden's disastrous debate performance that upended his re-election bid. While few expect a similar political earthquake to result from this matchup, both sides will be looking to score that knockout blow.
The stakes for Tuesday night's debate couldn't be any greater. This is kind of the first time they'll get to see both candidates on the stage together. I think it's the first time they've ever been in the same room.
Harris and Trump will be sparring in a state expected to play a crucial role in November's election. Polls show the candidates essentially tied in Pennsylvania, a key swing state that has sided with the winner of the last two presidential contests by just tens of thousands of votes.
Given it's one night only and the unique history and circumstances surrounding it, it's going to be unforgettable and could go down as one of the most impactful presidential debates of all time.
Like the June debate between Trump and Biden, Tuesday's showdown will have no live audience, and the candidates' mics will be muted when it's the other person's turn to speak. Trump sees the square-off as his best chance yet to end the political honeymoon Harris has enjoyed since taking over as the Democratic candidate.
This may be his last chance to change the narrative and the trajectory of the race. This 90-minute event will be the way to do it.
Call says Harris, a former prosecutor who is still introducing herself to the nation, enters the night with relatively high expectations.
I think the stakes are great for both candidates. Maybe a little higher for Harris in that she's not as defined, and she's had such a good rollout from July, and so people are expecting a lot.
With less than 2 months to go before voters head to the polls and early voting in some states starting just around the corner, Tuesday's matchup could be a defining moment in a presidential election that has already, repeatedly, defied history.
China's launched a complaint against Canada with the World Trade Organization. It stems from the recently announced tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, aluminum, and steel. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced late last month that Canada would impose a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland cited unfair trading practices and abysmal environmental and labor standards as the reason for the tariffs. Air Canada's offered its pilots a 30% raise as the strike deadline nears. The airline says the pay boost to more than 5,000 pilots would take place within the next few years. The union says Air Canada pilots are paid less than half of what their industry counterparts receive. Pilots at Air Canada would receive a 20% increase up front, followed by annual raises over a 3-year period. Pilots with 1 to 4 years of service would receive more. The offer means that a captain with 10 years of service flying a wide-body aircraft with a current salary of $350,000 a year may see an increase of more than $100,000 over the life of the contract. The pilots are set to strike mid-September if no agreement is reached. Parks Canada says an illegal drone led to a halt in firefighting efforts in Jasper National Park earlier this week. It says all aircraft had been grounded for an extended period of time after the drone was found. The agency says similar cases in the past have resulted in fines of more than $10,000. Parts of the popular Rocky Mountain tourist spot have reopened to visitors after devastating wildfires swept through the region earlier this summer. Alberta government officials say new market rules introduced by the province have decreased electricity prices year over year by close to 60% in August. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Alberta's Affordability and Utilities Minister, Nathan Neudorf, who joins us from here in Lethbridge. Nathan, can you explain in more detail how the market power mitigation regulation is having an impact on our bills?
Well, that was meant to just make sure that we didn't see extreme pricing volatility like we did last summer. And it's definitely increased the behavior of a lot of bidders to make sure that they're more forthright. And we have the electricity that we need to go through every day. There are really hot days when there's a lot of electricity being used for air conditioning. And it has been working. Obviously, we don't like to have to put those rules in place, but we've seen a lot of behavior and we've seen more generation come online, which means there's more competition. And this is having the desired result for Albertans: much lower, much more stable electricity pricing.
What about work on the grid itself? How's that coming along? I mean, we don't want to run into another issue where we're having to borrow electricity from Saskatchewan or Montana again.
We are restructuring our electricity market to get to a day-ahead market. That means that generators have to commit a day ahead for the electricity that they're going to provide the following 24 hours and the price that they're going to provide that. And if they don't provide that electricity, then they're going to have to pay the difference between that electricity and whatever we had to buy for it, which means we get reliability as well as affordability. It increases competition, and it does so in a very transparent way a day ahead of time.
Thanks so much for your time today, Nathan. That was Alberta Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf joining us from Lethbridge. A new $241 million wheat flour milling facility is going to be built in the hamlet of Springbrook in Red Deer County. Officials with P&H Milling Group say the new facility will mill around 750 metric tons of wheat from Western Canadian farmers into flour each and every day. It'll complement the company's wheat and durum milling operation located here in Lethbridge. The project is expected to create around 200 temporary and 27 full-time permanent jobs. In a media release, Alberta Agriculture Minister R.J. Sigurdsson says P&H Milling Group's new flour mill project is proof our agri-processing investment tax credit program is doing its job to attract large-scale investments in value-added agricultural manufacturing. A judge has sentenced a man who stabbed and killed a 17-year-old girl in an Alberta high school classroom to life in prison with no chance of parole for 12 years. Dylan Poutney was convicted earlier this year of second-degree murder in the death of Jennifer Winkler.
Well, it certainly fit the range that I was anticipating having regards to the Crown. Seeking 15, we're seeking 10, so it's in there.
Is that something you might appeal?
I don't know. I have to talk to Mr. Poutney first. I mean, it's been a long 3 years for him. He just needs a little bit of time to decompress right now. And we'll talk about that. He's sick, right? And sick people need to be treated regardless of their situation in society. It is just a nightmare for everyone involved. And I just hope that they're able to find some sort of peace, right? Because that's all that we all want, really.
I got 2 young girls at home and my wife. I will make sure I do anything to protect them. I'll be there every parole hearing, every chance I get, to make sure that he's in there for as long as possible.
The Alberta RCMP continues its search for Elijah Blake Strawberry in connection to the murder of Colin John Hoff of Airdrie. They believe that Strawberry remains in Alberta and ask that Albertans remain vigilant and are warned not to approach him as he's considered armed and dangerous. The Alberta RCMP has extended the time frame for the $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the 28-year-old Strawberry. He's described as having a light complexion, just over 6 feet tall, 169 pounds with brown hair. He also has several tattoos. The most recognizable of these tattoos includes trust on his left hand, honor and loyalty on his right hand, X's and a cobweb design on his right forehead, and geometric lines on his left neck and face that extend onto the forehead. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of Elijah Blake Strawberry, you're asked to call the Strathmore RCMP right away at 403-934-3535 or call 911. Any tips received from the public will be actively investigated. The folks with the Alberta Association of Childcare Entrepreneurs are feeling frustrated these days. Workers say the working relationship with the federal government may be a little strained when it comes to the $10 a day daycare. Crystal Churcher, chair of the association, says Ottawa is moving too slowly in its process when it comes to the childcare initiative.
Our federal government, provincial governments have not been able to act quickly enough in creating new spaces under all the restrictions and strings of this federal program in order to meet the demand, and families are just sitting on wait lists. So we're really seeing families struggling to find childcare. Allowing the provinces to have jurisdiction again over childcare and to remove all of the costs of this program federally. What we're seeing, some of the things that we don't always see publicized about this program is that there's a huge administration allocation of funds. So just federally, it's 10% of $30 billion that goes back to our federal government just to administer this program. I mean, how many childcare spaces could that amount create? So what we're asking for is to really just put the money in the hands of the provinces, eliminate some of this federal overreach and all the strings that are coming with this program, make it simple and make it accessible for families.
The association is hosting a comprehensive webinar focused on the challenges and opportunities within the national childcare landscape. The event will take place Thursday at 12 o'clock. There are still tickets available and it's free admission. The Southern Alberta Toy Run is taking place tomorrow here in Lethbridge. This is the 43rd year of the event, which brings together motorcycle riders from all over supporting a great cause. Dallas Hardy is president of the Southern Alberta Bikers, who's the sanctioning body for the Southern Alberta Toy Run. He says the event is really about collecting donations for children in need.
Yeah, the whole point of this event, Hal, is basically we gather up stuffies, stuffed animals that get donated to multiple different charitable organizations around Southern Alberta, the hospital, Harbour House, multiple different places that can put them to use. And we also collect financial donations that get put into our pot, and we distribute that money throughout Southern Alberta to different organizations that need it. I think last year we donated to, I believe, 12 to 15 different organizations, and just try to make a return to the community that's so good to us, just to give back. And it's a great day to get the biker community to get together and have some fun and make a good impact and do something for the community.
Hardy says with this ride, they're also honoring those who have been injured or lost their lives while riding a motorcycle. He's encouraging those who've been affected by such tragedies to come out. The Toy Run begins with a breakfast at Honker's Pub tomorrow morning around 8 a.m. The City of Lethbridge has released a newly updated land acknowledgement in partnership with the Blackfoot and Métis people of the area just ahead of Reconciliation Week. The revised acknowledgement emphasizes the lands of the Blackfoot while recognizing other Indigenous and Métis people who live in the lands where Lethbridge is found.
So in July, the City of Lethbridge updated the land acknowledgement statement to be more inclusive to all Indigenous people living in Lethbridge, but also to rename the Métis, as there was some structural changes within their organization, and we are now the District 1 with the Métis Nation of Alberta, so we are no longer the District 3. So we wanted to have that changed, and then as well just to be more inclusive with all Indigenous people living in Lethbridge while maintaining the fact that we are on Blackfoot territory and honoring the land that we live on.
It's a wonderful build-up for, our week-long activity. As Echo said, it's immense. We have so much, so I just encourage everyone from the north, the south, the east, the west to get out and get involved.
The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is coming up on September the 30th. If you want to make a difference in our community, the City of Lethbridge is inviting you to apply to be part of the city's boards, commissions, and committees. Lethbridge City Councillor Belinda Crowson says by doing so, you'll have the opportunity to participate in the direction the city is taking on a wide range of issues.
We need you to volunteer for these and to give your opinions and to help us decide the future of our city. It's also a wonderful way if you are a student, if you are someone looking to build your resume, if you are someone who has great ideas, your ideas are required to make Lethbridge as best we can be. We are a city of over 100,000 people. We have diverse backgrounds, we have diverse opinions, we have a wide range of education, and the more we can reflect that around those tables, the different the ideas are and the better we're reflecting what the citizens really want.
Certainly, some of the things that we've heard from our current and past volunteers is they've learned a lot about city governance. They've learned a lot about their community. They've been able to connect with different individuals and groups around the city. And some have come so far as to actually become employees of the city. We've seen actually councillors, past and present, who have all contributed in past functions on our boards, commissions, committees as well. So,
city officials say the campaign is already underway and will keep running until October the 4th. Festival Square is taking on a bit of a Bavarian flavor this weekend. Oktoberfest YQL kicked off Thursday evening and continues through Saturday at the downtown Lethbridge location. The annual event is celebrating its 10th year in our city, and organizers are thrilled with the warm weather we've been receiving. As the name suggests, most people would expect to see Oktoberfest take place in October, but event director Johnny Pogo says there are good reasons to hold the event here in September.
The actual Oktoberfest in Germany also happens in September. It happened from some wedding that happened in like the 1800s, and it's meant to celebrate the harvest that's about to happen because the fall's coming and you gotta chop all the crops down or something. The second reason we do it in September and so early is so we get good weather. We have done it years past at the end of September. One year we did it in October. It was cold, and nobody wants to be outside getting rained on, drinking in 4-degree weather. It's basically just a celebration of all things Oktoberfest, which is the traditional Bavarian festival they have down in Munich, Germany. So we sell a lot of the good German beer, we sell a lot of the good German food, and we have a great German band playing great music.
Sehr gut. Around 500 people per day usually take in Oktoberfest YQL, but the warmer weather could drive up those numbers substantially. The Lethbridge Polytechnic Kodiak soccer season is about to begin, with both the men's and women's teams having pretty high aspirations for a championship title this year. BCN's Landon Hickok has that story.
The Lethbridge Polytechnic Kodiak soccer teams are set to kick off their season openers this weekend, with the men and women's team traveling together to Calgary for games against Ambrose University and Sept. The Kodiak men's finished with 4 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws last season. In the postseason, they fell short in the semifinals to Nate 6-0. This year, the team feels that their increased bond and teamwork is the key to the team's success.
Last year we were more individual. This year we're a lot more close. All the boys are always hanging out, always backing each other. And I think that's something we may have lacked last year.
You know, I think our biggest strength is that everybody enjoys the game. We all have a huge community behind us, and I think our team has a huge amount of chemistry. Everybody likes each other, everybody's having fun.
The rest of the guys outfield, I guess here, seem to be extremely well motivated themselves. So, you know, it's for success, you have to have that internal motivation, and the fellas have it.
Super excited. We're hoping we can get 6 points, 2 wins, and yeah, super excited.
As for the women's team, they finished with an 11-1 record, but fell short in the postseason, losing in the bronze medal game to Concordia University. Despite the disappointing end, they are motivated to continue this season where they left off.
This year, as a team, I think the expectations are just to stay consistent throughout the season because we have a lot of new girls coming in, so it's a lot of our time like first playing together. So we just want to get comfortable with each other and stay positive throughout the whole season. I know that we'll have a lot of tough games coming up, so as long as we stay like together as a unit, I think we'll do really well, and we'll hopefully finish top 3 in the South, and then hopefully maybe go further from there. So yeah.
Their strongest thing there is when we have a game plan, we get that game plan, and you know they stick to it, so they keep going. You know, from the first minute to the last. So that's, game plan, and playing to that plan and sticking to it is very, very important.
Each team will face their respective opponents in back-to-back matchups against Ambrose University on Saturday and then Sept on Sunday. The season will run until late October, where each squad then hopes that playoffs will then immediately follow. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
And hopefully the Kodiaks can bring home a couple of championships this season. It would be wonderful. It's hard to believe that fall is just around the corner. It was sunny and hot again today across much of southwestern Alberta. Will the heat continue? A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We enjoyed another beautiful day here in Lethbridge, sunny and hot. Tonight, it should be another amazing night for stargazing with a low near 10 degrees. Saturday, sunshine on tap with a high expected over 30 once again. Sunday, pretty much the same picture with a high near 31. Monday, sunshine expected with a high of 32 degrees. Now things will start to cool off a little bit on Tuesday. Expect some clouds to roll in and the mercury to drop down to around 22. Wednesday, mainly overcast day with a high of 19. Thursday, some showers in the forecast with a high expected near 16 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 21 with an average low of 7. The record high was 33 degrees set back in 1998, and the record low was a chilly 2 degrees in 1929. The sun rose at 6:55 and will set at 8:02. The days are definitely getting shorter. Let's see how Saturday is shaping up across the country now. Expect a clear sky on the west coast, sunshine at 28 for Victoria, sunny at 24 degrees for Vancouver. A sunny Saturday is also shaping up for our two biggest cities here in Alberta. Expect a high of around 30 degrees for both Calgary and Edmonton. Sunshine at 30 degrees is on tap for Regina, Saskatoon even hotter with a high of 32 expected. Winnipeg will have a clear sky with a high of 23 degrees on Saturday. Now in the central part of the country, expect clouds and rain and a high of only 16 degrees in both Toronto and Ottawa, showers and a high of 23 degrees for Montreal. Over in Atlantic Canada, clouds and showers are on tap with a high of 17 degrees for Fredericton, overcast rain at 21 degrees for Halifax, showers and 20 for Charlottetown, and in St. John's, expect sun mixed with clouds and a high of 17 degrees on Saturday. Canada's canola industry could take a $1 billion hit in the wake of new Chinese trade actions. That's according to international credit rating agency Morningstar DBRS. The agency says China's plan to launch an anti-dumping investigation into canola seed imports from Canada could result in China implementing tariffs on the crop. The last time China blocked shipments of canola seed from two major Canadian companies was between 2019 and 2020. It cost the Canadian canola sector around $2.35 billion. Canada's unemployment rate continued to trend higher in August. It went up to 6.6%. That's up from 6.4% in July. Stats Canada's labour force survey showed the economy added a modest 22,000 jobs last month. Students returning to school faced a challenging summer job market this year, with their unemployment rate rising to the highest level since the summer of 2012, excluding the pandemic summer of 2020. The increase in the unemployment rate comes days after the Bank of Canada delivered its third consecutive interest rate cut and signaled more cuts may be on the way. Bank of Canada officials say they want to see more economic growth, acknowledging the job market slack is on the rise. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 206 basis points to 22,781. The Dow was also down 410 points to 40,345. The S&P 500 was down 94 points to 5,408, and the Nasdaq was also down 436 points to 16,690. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.48 to 67.67 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to $2.28 US. Gold was down $19.50 to $2,497.17 US an ounce, and silver was down 89 cents to $27.93 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.48 per bushel, barley is at $5.73, canola is at $12.90, and corn is at $7.26 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was down $1.30 to $183.15. Feeder cattle September contract was down $2.33 to $263.73, and lean hogs October contract went up 90 cents to $87.33. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 73.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris will square off in a high-stakes debate for the first and perhaps only time on Tuesday. The presidential candidates will be fighting to sway voters on the biggest stage in U.S. politics. The U.S. federal election is slated for November the 5th. There's a group which keeps skiers safe on our mountains called the Canadian Ski Patrol. Coming up, BCN's Naveen Day is going to chat with the president of the Canadian Ski Patrol South Zone, Tim Fife, who works out at Castle Mountain. That Q&A is coming up shortly. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
With recent rains here across southern Alberta, ski hills like Castle Mountain have already received their first drop of snow, and with skiers are already dreaming about hitting the slopes and carving lines through the powder. No ski hill experience is complete without seeing the volunteers of the Canadian Ski Patrol. To talk more about the work of these volunteers at Castle Mountain and beyond, we are joined by Tim Fife. He is the president of the Canadian Ski Patrol Southern Alberta Zone Association. Tim, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
Now, can you start by telling us a bit about the Southern Alberta chapter of the Canadian Ski Patrol and its role in the community?
Yeah, sure. So the Canadian Ski Patrol has been in existence since 1941. We are coast to coast. There's over 225 Canadian Ski Patrol ski areas. And Castle Mountain, where we currently patrol, is just past Pincher Creek there, and we've been patrolling there since 1968.
Wow. And what specific skills will participants be learning or improving during their training periods?
So some of the key responsibilities of our patrol, contributing to safety on the slopes, inspection, sweeps, ongoing observations. So we'll do a sweep in the morning, and then we'll do a sweep in the evening just to make sure that the ski hill is safe for the participants before they even come on the ski hill. And then we do a sweep at night so that we make sure there's nobody left on the ski hill that might be injured. We look for factors on the slopes to make sure that other people can take care of those. Like, so if the grooming isn't the greatest, we can help smooth out those things and promote some safety on the ski hill. We provide first aid. It's at an advanced level, we call it. So we call it advanced first aid because it might take an hour for the ambulance to arrive. And then we have to also be able to transport patients in a toboggan down a hill safely. And then once we get them down the hill safely, we take them into what we call a little facility where we wait for either the ambulance, or maybe it's minor enough that just their family or somebody can take them. And then we might recommend that they go to the hospital if it's that severe. If it's just a minor injury, then we just say, hey, this is how you should take care of it when you get home.
Sounds like this is a pretty demanding role. So what are some of the key qualities or skills that you look for in a ski patrol volunteer?
Actually, we look for people that are at about an intermediate level of a skier or snowboarder. So they're able to ski like the double black diamonds. They're able to ski the whole mountain, but we don't expect them to be an expert skier. We can work with that as long as they're at an intermediate level. Somebody that enjoys the outdoors. And then what we do is it's an 80-hour advanced training course. So it's 4 full weekends that we train them. And we use the Polytechnic facility in Lethbridge here to do that. And then once they get out to the hill, we have more training. So once they get to the hill, we have to teach them. We have to see what their skiing ability is and their boarding ability if they're a boarder and a snowboarder. And then we also have to look at once we've assessed what level they're at, if they're at that intermediate level or if they're just a little bit below it. If they're a little bit below that level, what we can do is we can recommend that, hey, thanks for coming out. You need to go get some lessons, go get some professional lessons, and maybe come back to us next year. So we can kind of like see where they're at. And if we think we can work with them, then we go that step further and we start training them with the toboggan. And we have our own in-house people on our ski patrol that do that. They're certified to do that. They're all levels of our Canadian Ski Patrol. We stay at a high standard of first aid, and we also stay at a high standard to meet up with the ski areas. So we ski around with what we call the Pro Patrol, and then we're the volunteers on the weekend.
Okay, and what are the benefits to being a member of the Canadian Ski Patrol?
I would say benefits are not only having that advanced first aid course, like I teach here at our Polytechnic in Lethbridge, and I teach heavy equipment technicians. So for me to have that level of first aid, if someone in my shop gets hurt, I can help out. So not only can you use this training that we give you at the ski hill, but we also help out the community. So this weekend in Lethbridge, there's the Lasso Ultra running race, and we provide the first aid for that. So we help out the community that way also, not just at the ski hill. That helps us with our volunteer to provide money for our jackets and our equipment, our sleds. We like all that equipment is expensive. We have to have our own equipment to do the first aid training. So that all costs money. So we do bingos and that kind of stuff in casinos to help us out that way too.
Oh, interesting. And for a Canadian Ski Patrol volunteer, what does a typical day look like on the ski hill?
I would say a typical day. What happens is we all meet. We're kind of fortunate on our ski patrol because we have what we call a mountain safety office that we're allowed to use the one side of it, and we're allowed to stay overnight there. So then at the bottom part of it, we have a patrol leader and assistant patrol leader where we meet, and then they go into a meeting and we find out what the conditions are. So we find out if there's what the avalanche conditions are and what maybe our folks are going to have to expect out there. So our patrol leader and assistant patrol leader, they liaison with the pro patrol, and then they put that out to our people that are, so it might be like 12 people that day. And then once they have that information, we have to get permission from the pro patrol because they're the ones out there keeping us safe too. They do all the bombing and all that kind of stuff to make sure that we're not going to be caught in an avalanche. So we have to get permission to come up the hill from them. And then what happens after that is we all have duties for the day. So we're all assigned what we call hut duties. So at the very top of the ski hill, they have a little place that we can stay out of the elements, and we stay there for an hour. So then we're at the top of the hill ready. So if there's an incident, a call will come in from dispatch, and then they'll say, "Hey, we've noticed a participant has tripped and has some difficulties getting down the hill. Can you go check that out?" And so then we'll go and ski down to that incident, and then we'll report once we get there to dispatch what's going on and what other things we might need to help us out. So maybe it's just a minor thing, and we say, "Hey, we can help this person ski the rest of the way down the hill," or "Hey, they're having breathing difficulties. We need a sled. We need this. We need stuff right away." So then there'll be another person waiting at the top of the hill to bring that sled down you and help you out.
Can you share any stories or experiences where ski patrol volunteers made a significant difference on the slopes?
I would say that for Castle Mountain, they tell us that they depend on us because there's only 5 or 6 of them, and so if it's a big snow day, they're busy checking out the slopes to make sure they're safe for everybody. And so our job to help them out is to provide that first aid and ski around and help them out that way. And so I would say that that's our significance to the ski hill, whether it be here at Castle Mountain or whether it be in Calgary, or in Banff or anything like that. We're across Canada. And so that's what we do as volunteers is we're helping out the hill so that the pro guys can go and do all the safety stuff, and we can go around and help out with the first aid and maybe fixing fences and that kind of stuff.
And for someone who is interested in volunteering but unsure about their skills or experience, maybe they do ski or board at an intermediate level, what would you say to encourage them to join?
What I would say is if they're already at that level, we have very good trainers. Like I said, so we have an 80-hour course. and it's a blended learning. So we have an online course where you will do a lot of a lot of the theory stuff online, and then the skills that we required you to have, you come into the classroom and our instructors are there, and we don't just have one instructor for the students. We have a few instructors in the classroom rotating around. And then that way we might like give a little spiel on this is how you deal with this situation. And then we have a bunch of instructors that come around and say we have to show them how to treat a broken collarbone. So then we have other instructors that come around and they say, okay, this is how you should treat this. This is how you should put it into a sling. And no, you're not doing that correct. So we'll have a bunch of instructors coming around and dealing with that situation to help with their training. So it's a very well-oiled machine in that respect.
And speaking of training, I understand that you have a training event coming up on September 12th and 16th. What can you tell us about this event?
It's at CASA in Lethbridge. And we've already put some information out there where CASA is located. And what it is, what we do there is there's myself and a few other people from our ski patrol. We have a person that's been on our ski patrol for like over 50 years. Myself, it's been 12 years. And so we have experienced people come to that. And what they do is we give them information just like what I'm telling you right now. A lot of them have questions. So what we require is we require you to come out 3 times in a month. And so that would be on the weekends. So what I do is I go like a Saturday, Sunday, and then maybe I skip a weekend, and then the next week I might be out there a Saturday. And then we tell them that, hey, some of the other requirements to pay for all this, you're required to do like 3 bingos. When we have a casino come up, and then when we have these events like the Lasso Ultra, we require you to do 1 of those events or 2 of those events. And so then we just give them more information on kind of what it would be like to be part of the ski patrol and all the training and how much you have to commit to volunteer for us.
And looking ahead, what are your goals for the Southern Alberta chapter of the Canadian Ski Patrol, and how can the community support your efforts? You mentioned bingo nights and casino nights.
Yeah, so casinos right now, we just did one over a year ago. So we do those it looks like every 4 years. So that definitely helps us out. We only do about 8 to 9 bingos in a whole ski season or a whole year. So that supports us. And then the Prairie Runners Association that puts on these runs, they support us by financially supporting us by providing the first aid for their runs. So that helps us out in the community. And I would say our wider Canadian Ski Patrol, right now, one of the goal sets with them is our learning management system. So that online system, that is now becoming a more robust system because it used to be run by volunteers. So it'll be a lot better for all patrollers involved because that is going to have a paid position for it now. Where in the past it was all volunteers, so it was very hard to like if all of a sudden I wanted to do my online training, I had to wait for a volunteer to let me into that system. So now what they've done is they're being a lot more progressive and hiring somebody to do that with the funds that we have now.
Well, that's great. Now, Tim Fife is the president of the Canadian Ski Patrol Southern Alberta Zone Association. Tim, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
A new study published by the Fraser Institute reveals that the federal government's plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions will impose significant costs on Canadians while also failing to meet the government's own emission reduction target. So the author of this study joins us now from Guelph, Ontario. Dr. Ross McKittrick is a professor of economics at the University of Guelph and a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute, which is an independent, nonpartisan Canadian public policy think tank. Dr. Ross McKittrick, great to have you on today. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks. My pleasure to be here.
Of course. Okay, so first of all, maybe can you refresh our memories as to what the goals are with the government's emission reduction plan?
The main goal is that by the year 2030, they want to have reduced emissions to at least 40% below where they were in 2005. And in 2019, they were about at the same level as where they were in 2005. So it's like trying to reduce emissions by about 40% below where they were at the start of this decade. And that is quite a big undertaking. They also have an interim goal for 2026, but there's no way they'll get there. So I more or less ignore that part and just look at what will be the effects of their policy plan, and will it achieve the target, and what will it cost for what it does actually accomplish.
Okay, so to achieve these goals, I guess we're seeing increases in carbon tax, clean fuel regulations, and electric vehicle mandates. So these things do have an impact on our wallets, of course, and that's only 6 years away, that 2030 mark. So how could this affect our economy?
Well, people are pretty used to the discussion around the carbon tax. People know that that's raised the cost of fuels and operating farms and industry and that sort of thing. In my study, I point out that the carbon tax is actually only one small part of a much larger package of policies. Another major one you mentioned, the clean fuels regulation. And then beyond that, there's about 140 other regulatory instruments that they're proposing to bring in, spending programs and mandates. There's the emissions cap on the oil and gas sector. There are fertilizer reduction requirements for farms. There's the electric vehicle mandate, building energy efficiency standards. There's a huge list of these regulations. So in the study, what I've done is I've broken it down into the 3 sections there. So the carbon tax, clean fuels regulation, and then all the other regulatory measures. And the carbon tax is fairly expensive. I don't think it's all that big a deal in comparison. Like by the end of the decade, it's going to cost about $1,100 per worker. So it is a costly policy. But the clean fuels regulation pushes that cost up to about $3,000 per worker, and then all the other regulations, that's where the cost really hits. So then the tally rises up to about $6,500 per worker per year. And for all of that cost, which I think is just so expensive that they're not going to succeed in maintaining these policies. But if they did, it would only get them a little over halfway to the goal of 40% emission reduction.
Wow.
So
that's a lot
the
of
overall
expense
message is
for what the outcome is.
right. And even on their own reckoning of what the benefits are of reducing emissions, and I think that they've overstated the benefits, but even if we take that at face value, the package costs at least 3 times as much as the benefits that they say it will generate.
Well, I guess because their argument is that the Liberal government is using is that any negative impact on the economy is still worth the cost because it's saving the planet from the damage of climate change. But your study, of course, is suggesting that some of those climate damage claims are misleading.
Yeah, I don't go into that part in too much detail. They put out some work last year saying what they thought the value is to the global climate of reducing emissions in Canada, and they peg it at around $200 per ton. And I've written before about how they came up with that number and why I think it's a gross exaggeration. But even if, like I say, we take it at face value, their policy package costs far more than $200 per ton, and some elements of it will be up over $600 per ton. So on really any reckoning, including their own calculation of it, it costs too much. It's putting a huge cost burden on Canadians, and it's more expensive than it needs to be, just because it's so much regulation. It's going to be an extremely inefficient way of trying to reduce emissions.
Yeah, so if all of these emissions reduction targets are perfectly met within this time frame, and you're saying that they're not going to meet that target, you're saying, what was it, 40% of the government's
Yeah,
own targets?
40% by
So how did
2030.
they miscalculate somehow, or just an oversight?
It's always been a puzzle where they come up with these numbers, and I really think that one part of the cabinet doesn't talk to another part, because one of the big drivers of emissions growth is population growth. So at the same time as they're saying we want to have income go up and we want to have emissions go down, and we're going to have extremely rapid population growth through their various immigration programs, they can't all work together. They can't do all three. And in particular, with the emission targets, they would barely make sense if they stuck to historic rates of population growth. But once they started bringing in a number of people and trying to hit a 2% population growth numbers, it just became impossible to even reduce emissions, really, let alone get them down by 40% without absolutely crushing the economy in the process.
Right. And like you were saying in your study that it could end up costing, what was it, $6,700 per worker annually. So how is that calculated, and what would that look like practically?
Well, as far as how it's calculated, I have use of a large macroeconomic model that has a lot of detailed representation of every sector in the economy and all the provinces and the tax system and things like that. So it's a matter of representing the carbon tax itself, and then the costs of things like the clean fuels regulation, the cost of EVs and building code changes, just building all those into the model, and then it tracks. For instance, if productivity goes down in certain sectors, or if production costs go up, where all those costs get transmitted through the economy. And so it's a modeling process. I think people lose sight of the fact that while the carbon tax is expensive, the money does reappear at various points. Not all of it. A lot of it gets wasted, but some of it reappears. But when they put these regulations in place, those they reduce productivity. They raise the cost of producing goods and services, but there's no offsetting benefit. There's no new money that's created in the process. So regulatory measures typically are much more expensive for accomplishing these kinds of goals compared to something like the carbon tax.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those regulations, they haven't really kicked in yet. So people aren't really feeling the pinch of them, and they may not even be aware that they're coming. They also have really much smaller effects on emissions. So the reduction in emissions that you get from things like the EV mandate, it's very small. Like, it'll take decades before that really has an effect on emissions in Canada. But there are a lot of very large upfront costs to it.
Yeah. You mentioned off the top there farmers, and they're affected as well. So I understand that farmers are expected to reduce their use of fertilizer by 30% by 2030. And that seems, I don't know, maybe unrealistic. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and in that case, I mean, the farmers in Canada have long been working at reducing fertilizer use. It's a costly input. They don't waste it. And they get a lot of productivity out of the products that they do use. So this is a case where you have the Minister of the Environment who really has no knowledge about agricultural practices, but he hit upon this idea of forcing the farmers to reduce fertilizer use and just sets a target. And then it's up to the agricultural sector to try to cope with it. Ultimately, the way it shows up in an economic analysis is it raises the cost of producing what you are already producing. So if it's still going to be a wheat field or a barley field that you're growing, and you can't use the fertilizers that you used to use, you either produce less or you try to produce the same amount, but you have maybe a more labor intensive, or you have to swap in some other inputs that you weren't otherwise going to use because they're costlier. So the ultimate effect is it raises the cost of production, reduces productivity, and just pushes us further in this trend, which is a big problem in Canada, that we have had very little productivity growth, and that fundamentally undermines the capacity to raise incomes in the future.
You talk a lot about electric vehicles. So what are some of the problems with the government's EV mandate? What kind of feedback are you hearing from the business sector on this, for example?
I published separately a very detailed study of the EV mandate for Canada. Right now, the market quickly grew around affluent households wanting, Teslas and cars like that. They had a bit of a cool factor to them. But people have also discovered that there are currently very practical difficulties. The electricity is much more expensive than it used to be, and there aren't that many charging stations for what people need. And especially when you get out of the big urban centers, you may just not have any access to charging stations at all. And then they aren't as useful in all weather conditions, especially in Canada. So proponents of EVs like to point to the fact that some things like batteries are getting cheaper to produce, which is true. But a lot of the things that go into making an electric vehicle are single sourced from China. And China is not going to give us any price cuts on these things. They have an EV industry of their own. They would happily price us right out of the market. So the costs aren't coming down fast enough to meet the EV mandate target. If the technology changes dramatically in the next few years, and if EVs suddenly become really cheap and popular, we don't need a mandate. People will make the switch voluntarily. But if you have to force people to make the switch, essentially you're saying, okay, you can no longer buy a $30,000 Honda or Toyota or something like that. You have to buy a $70,000 EV and get worse performance out of it. And that's the sort of thing that it obviously makes most people worse off. And it just adds to the cost of living in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there could be safety factors as well with EV. I mean, the thought of being stuck somewhere where there is no charging station is a little bit terrifying. Hopefully they'll increase that or improve on that. Also, I was surprised at how quiet these vehicles are. I mean, and how fast as well. Like they can just be behind you and you didn't even hear it. So I don't know. My mind goes to how many fatalities there could be in the future because of how quiet they are. People are walking across the street and somebody comes zapping through. You don't even hear them and they're on top of you. I don't know. Has anyone addressed that at all?
That is an issue, yeah. And there are proposals of for instance, simulated engine noises, just to make them safer that way. And now EVs do also tend to have very sophisticated accident avoidance systems. So in some cases, that may be that if you are a pedestrian, you don't hear it coming, it will know that you're there and will make a signal. But you're right about the safety, especially in a country like Canada, where you've got long distances and sometimes very cold weather. And really, who wants to set out on a long road trip in an EV through the prairies where you just don't know if there's going to be a charging station? There might be one on the map, but you get there and it may be shut down and it's the only one for hundreds of kilometers, and then you're stuck. And so
Scary.
that is an issue that really stands in the way of them being practical.
Definitely.
And of course, other vehicle categories like pickup trucks and large duty vehicles.
Yeah. And
EVs are a long way from
the
being
government
able to
believes
replace
it's a good
those.
sell because based on its core base of supporters. What are the polls saying about EVs? Is there any public support for these measures, or are people? What are the polls saying?
Polls can be a bit misleading because you can ask a poll and make it sound like these are great products, and people will say, sure, we should have more EVs on the road. The important measure is the market data, and are people actually buying them? And so in British Columbia and Quebec, they have very generous subsidy schemes for people, and so they've had higher market penetration there. But in other provinces, the take-up has been much too slow to meet the targets that the government has set. And so pretty soon, those sales mandates in 2026 are really going to start to bind. And that means car companies will either have to sell, they'll have to move those cars off the lot, or they'll be charging a penalty on internal combustion engine vehicles. I believe it'll be $20,000 per vehicle will be the penalty that they have to pay if they don't meet their EV sales targets. And so again, polls, I'm sure people will, and if you've been in one, you're right, they accelerate really fast. They're actually quite fun to drive when they're charged. And the challenge, though, is the cost, the inconvenience, and the grid problems. People who've looked at, well, where would we get the electricity? If everyone in a medium-sized city switch to EVs, we don't have nearly enough electricity for them.
Yeah.
And at the rate that we build power generating facilities in this country, we just can't cope with a large scale market penetration of EVs. Yeah. Ironically, what you'd start to see is a lot of diesel powered charging stations set up. So people would have to, they can't plug into the grid, so they'd be putting diesel generators out and have EV charging stations. And then at that point, you've just completely defeated the purpose.
Interesting. I mean, it's a topic that can go, I mean, you can just talk about it all day, seriously. We are out of time, though, but I really appreciate you being here and sharing your input with your study with us. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks so much, Dr. Ross. Dr. Ross McKittrick is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute and a professor of economics at the University of Guelph. You can read the entire study at fraserinstitute.org. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.